My feminist journey began at a local YWCA club in Lautoka in Fiji. It was a pathway of discovering my identity as a young woman, back then in 1986, within the women's rights and feminist movement. I was guided into that place by my mother, connecting me with the local and national movement. It was also a place of journeying that was rudely interrupted because of the 1987 military coup. And so what initially was a space of learning and connecting with human rights, singing songs of equality, development, and peace, became a space of conflict and struggle. It meant as I grappled with issues of racial and political identities, I initially retreated into a safer personal space. But it also meant finding the courage to re-emerge, to reclaim that space, because it was those global connections and solidarity with the anti-apartheid and other liberation movements learned through the World YWCA that made me acutely aware that there was a room for my faith in my activism and my work for equality, just and inclusive development and peace. That when we see injustice, we must speak out, even if it means challenging faith leaders, military, and political leaders. It also taught me community organizing, such as during the 2000 Blue Ribbon Vigil, a reminder that our advocacy must start by listening to women in local and rural communities outside of the capital, representing them, those who are asking us as women leaders who are also based in the capital to be accountable, inclusive. And this is also where my understanding of community media practice comes from. To celebrate the voice and agency of women, to listen and connect the dots for greater accountability to their rights, freedom, and peace. Experiencing political crises and bearing witness to women's narratives of brokering peace in Bougainville, in Solomons, in Tonga, and in Fiji has reinforced for me why we must use instruments such as CEDAW, the UN Security Council resolutions, and a peace development humanitarian nexus approach to realize gender transformative action. A feminist peace and security also means we need to address challenges within our broader movement. The Women's Peace Vigil in 2000 was about prayer and political action, which led me to face tensions over faith and feminism, including within feminist spaces, because to some degree my concern has been that there's an assumption that feminist practice is purely secular. The result, I feel, of taking just that approach is when we're not engaging in spaces of faith much earlier in the movement, has meant we've seen now a more conservative approach seeping into spaces that were initially the formative space of some of our most radical Pacific feminists. An additional point of conflict and struggle is one that's facing me right now when we have to consider where we engage and how far we also need to go to support young women to take leadership within organizations that we are members of, that we are part of, because they do want to belong, but it is also our role as the older women of the movement to support them, to nurture and guide them through the roadblocks that they face, not holding them, not putting blame on faults or mistakes, but actually seeing this as part of the challenges of learning to organize and lead. So part of the conflict for me is, what do we actually need to talk about as older women when we talk about intergenerational leadership? And how do we come to an agreement and an understanding with the younger movement, younger women of the movement who talk about standing on the shoulders of women who have paved the way? How do we have those conversations of learning to build on the political gains and to navigate through some of those roadblocks? The other conflict right now for me is the values that we talk about of gender justice, human rights, and feminism are more than just words on paper, are more than just labels for special days. How do we really reaffirm and demonstrate gender justice, human rights, and feminism in our day-to-day practice within our movement and within the broader scope of work that we do? It's probably one of the reasons why feminist coalition and movement building takes so much work, time, and energy, because it actually requires us to be willing to be reflective, to accept, to learn and unlearn, to hold ourselves and each other accountable, because spaces of power, even within civil society, even within the feminist movement, can sometimes be exclusionary. It makes me think about what are the words that we are using that can actually exclude or divide. So that requires us to look beyond our personal power. We need to ask ourselves not just who's in the room with us, and are they in the room because it makes us feel comfortable, and what needs to change so that we can deal with some of that discomfort to deal with the bigger issues that require change. We need this because despite all the commitments, we clearly need to hold our governance systems accountable. Our governments, our regional intergovernmental organizations, development agencies, and yes, the UN system. We must be bold to be able to say to our governments and member states and the UN to join us as the local experts, the part of the journey of the women who have been organizing for decades within our countries and regions, and not simply to projectize the work that we're doing, so that the frameworks that we develop for those transformative changes to happen in communities are both rooted in local realities as well as connected to global policies. For us, taking a seat at the table is also ensuring that we're there with our allies. It's not simply that we take a seat and forget, but actually to think about when might we be ready to withdraw and to redefine political processes to protect the work of our movement. Driving a gender transformative agenda is an opportunity to co-create a MAT for just and inclusive outcomes, including across the peace, development, climate and DRR, and humanitarian nexus. That's why in the Pacific, we've co-created the Shifting the Power Coalition and now the Pacific Island Feminist Alliance for Climate Justice, weaving together strands of experience to build stronger Pacific institutions, feminist movements for climate action and peace-building networks, to reaffirm what the Pacific Women's Movement offers, our networks, our agency, our abilities and innovations, as well as overcoming homogenization of women and young people. Because we can't be homogenizing local actors anymore, but instead we must be investing in dedicated spaces to enable that intergenerational, cross-gender and multi-stakeholder learning and engagement to happen. Thank you.